Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you so much for being at this session today. I'm really excited about this session. If Anjum could have made me a moderator for any session, I think she chose the perfect one, because I got to read some amazing books, which you're going to hear about now. Let me just tell you the way the session is going to go. We're going to start with each person's book reading 4 minutes from their book, so you get a feel and a sense of the book. And then another 6 minutes where I will ask questions to the person. Then we move to the second person, till the third, and then we will leave 10 minutes for questions from you all as well. So let me start by saying we're going to be hearing from Sumita from their book, Monologue.
Yes, let me read out a few pieces. I'm beginning with narrator 1, Bangladesh, age 28. The person's looking for a job. The problem is, I am not a fresh pass out, and therefore, my chance of getting a student visa is much less. People who work at the visa office clearly said, Apa, fresh pass outs are preferred for studying abroad. So, I may have to go out with a tourist visa. The other kind of visa is a job visa, which I can't have since I have not received any job offer. And you cannot work with a tourist visa. I know that. Also, you have to come back once the visa expires. While I'm considering this, as I do not have any other options of leaving this country, I may have to take a tourist visa and live for good, though I do not know anyone anywhere. But as I do not know them, They also do not know me. No one will point a finger at me and say, look, there goes the lesbian. That is all I'm expecting from life. That is my best option. Bangladesh, narrator 8, age 24, university student. And as a lesbian, I have no place in it. My religion completely condemns anal sex. It is gunah, sin. If it happens between two men, it is sin, or between a man and a woman. I don't even know what should happen between two women, as women have no place anywhere. But the Quran also says you should kiss your wife everywhere in the body from head to toe, to please her. Now, what would that mean in this context? Everything is so random. It says a man will get 70 hurpari at his service when he reaches the behesht after death, if he is religious enough. Now, once my husband gets all those angels and get busy with them, what will happen to me? There's no answer to that question. I think religion is like the helmet. Everyone wears it because they're afraid that otherwise their head can smash. We are compelled to abide by for fear of punishment. I would not wear the helmet before, but now, since there is a fine of 650, I have to wear it. West Bengal, narrator 11, 55, government employee. The moot point is that I don't support the institution of marriage at all, whether that happens between a man and a woman or between a queer couple. It's already full of inequalities. Violence is ingrained in it. It's steeped in patriarchy. Why should we invite that into our lives? I'm not talking about my personal choice only. I oppose marriage also in the queer movement that I'm part of. What will I gain from the right to marriage? The rights that I need in order to live as an individual or as a couple, why I must get them only if I walk through the marriage gate? I would rather propose the relationships have to be accepted much more openly. Relationships occur between human individuals. Why should the state have any authority to put a stamp of marriage on, or something similar on that? I want our movement to reach a stage where we can stop considering who is same-sex oriented and who's not, and demand these rights for everyone. Why must I give my property only to my husband or wife or partner? Why can't I have the right to give it to a friend, a colleague, or a comrade in our movement? Even if same-sex marriage becomes a reality one day, will that give me right to this? Not marriage, therefore. To get our rights, we need to understand relationships in a much wider sense. That is the future of our movement. I think I'm done.
Yes, that's perfect. So what you have just heard is some excerpts from monologue, which is the stories and straight out speak of women from Bangladesh as well as West Bengal from all walks of life. Thank you so much for that reading. And it was put together by Sappho, so we're going to hear a little bit about Sappho. Why and how was Sappho formed? And has it worked as a safe space for lesbian and queer women?
Actually, Sappho was formed in 1999 as an informal support group for lesbian and bisexual identifying women. Trans men, well, frankly speaking, we didn't have much understanding of the trans issues at that time, so I won't venture into that. It was an emotional support group that began in 1999, and it was not registered at all. But after a few years, from 2003, we decided that we need to go full on into this. Otherwise, it's not going to happen. So in 2003, Sappho for Equality was the first ever queer rights organization registered in the eastern of India. And since then, we have been working.
Wonderful work. And this is their second publication.
Yes.
So one of you
in
can...
English, yes.
In English.
We have done a lot of publications, but all in Bangla.
No, second publication in English, and lots in Bengali. And you can go to their website. It's a wonderful website.
Yes.
So I'm going to ask either of you ladies to answer the next question. Why did you choose to use lesbian rather than queer, and the ways in which these terms have been used in the context of Bengal, West Bengal and Bangladesh?
I have one thing to tell you at first, Jael. I am not a lady.
Okay.
I do not identify as a woman. I am a female-bodied person.
Okay, so I'll just call you by your name. Maybe
yes,
that's better.
Please call me by my name. That is my pronoun.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So which of you would like to answer that question?
Yeah.
Paromita?
Yeah. Thank you, Gail. I think this was a conscious choice. Just to sort of explain a little bit why I'm here, because this was a book put together by Sumita and Malavika, who's not here because she's on her way to Goa. and Sumita's going to join her very soon. But I wrote so they got together and they put together this book, which has 11 narratives of lesbian women from West Bengal, and from Bangladesh, 11 more from Bangladesh. And I wrote the foreword to that excellent book, which is, as I was saying, much more than a book, because it's a form. I think it's like, a lot of work, academic work, interesting writing that comes out of movements. I think it is an extension of the movement as well. And I think Sumita talks about it in her introduction. So when I was writing the foreword to the book, I had the opportunity of actually going through at kind of breakneck speed, these sort of narratives which spoke to me in very interesting ways. I've been associated with Sappho in various capacities for a very long time. And I think this is a very, very significant, because, and this is something I wrote in the foreword as well, I think this is a coming-of-age moment. And I think using lesbian instead of queer has something to do with that coming-of-age moment. So I think it is significant that, on Sappho's 21st birthday, this book sort of also came of age. And I think sort of choosing, it was a conscious choice that I think both Malavika and Sumita made to use lesbian, because they felt, and both of them spoke to me about it, they felt that in the larger queer movement, often the specificities of lesbian experience get erased or glossed over. And for many people, and this is something that emerged out of the narratives that I read, that I think for many people in both the Bengals, for many women or female identified persons, they are much more comfortable with the word lesbian, and they understand much more by it and communicate much more with it than with queer. It's not a term that has been sort of internalized or indigenized, which I think, lesbian has been in a way. So I think if you want to add.
Yeah, and another thing is that I found out that there are parallel movements happening in the book. One movement, if one of those is to identify oneself as a lesbian, that has become a movement, that yes, I am a lesbian, and I can say that out loud. At the same time, there is another movement parallel to that, where yes, I may have begun as a lesbian, but now I rather identify as a queer, because all my life experiences, all that I am not being able to express that or explain that by the single word lesbian. So both these things were happening at the same time.
As you can see, this could be an entire session. Monologue is a really, really interesting read, and really an eye-opener, and a very important for all of us, and also as a movement builder. So unfortunately, we've got to move to the next, because we only have 50 minutes for this very rich session. And we're going to move to Angshu, and it's about the Fern Road. And he's going to read 4 to 5 minutes from his really beautifully crafted novel. Bye.
Hello.
Okay.
Okay, I'll get straight to it then. Okay. Godiahat literally means the market of Godia. Tens of thousands of people shop here every day for vegetables, fish, fruits, mutton, stationery, tea, underwear. The footpaths that lead to the market are lined with shops that sell books and toys, sweetmeats and shoes and kitchen utensils. There are jewelers' shops where quiet old men sit behind iron bars, their magnifying glasses and their tiny scales. And there are holes in the wall that repair food processors and wristwatches. At the junction is a megastore that sells television sets, refrigerators, stereo systems, toasters and ovens. The most abundant, though, are the shops that sell clothing, costume jewelry, and cosmetics. They do brisk business all year round, but in the festive season, they go into overdrive. There are throngs of people on the footpaths, women mostly, walking at a leisurely pace. The shopkeepers vie for their attention. Mashima, they call out to the older matronly women. Orko's mother would probably qualify as Bodhi. Girls Orko's age are Didimonis. In this sea of humanity, Orko is less than human. No one calls out to him. No one ever tries to sell him anything. They hurry him along if he stops in his tracks. He dawdles by a newsstand, carelessly thumbing through a sports weekly. Across the footpath, perched precariously on the curb, is a shanty fashioned out of discarded asbestos siding and packing crates. Spread out on the counter are cardboard boxes containing lipstick, eyeliners, hair clips, and bottles of nail polish. Above the counter, strung out on lengths of twine, are earrings. They're mounted, like a lepidopterist's butterflies, on white cardboard squares, about half the size of a business card. A few weeks ago, Orko and Urmi had stopped at this stall on their way home. As they passed the shanty, the man in charge called out to Urmi, "Didimoni, here, 2 pairs for just 30 rupees." The bustle of Korea had faded away, and they were 7 years old again. Urmi just had her ears pierced. "Can I have earrings like Urmi's?" Orko remembers asking his mother. "Earrings? But you're a boy, and boys don't wear earrings," his mother said. "I'm not a boy," he said. That was the first time he remembers saying it. "Of course you're a boy," his mother replied. "Please?" That night, he prayed to Ma Lokhi to turn him into a girl, just like Urmi. He was going to need a new name, of course. Maybe his mother could help him with that. When he awoke the next morning, he ran his fingers through his hair, even before he was fully awake. He was disappointed when it felt familiar, short, rough, bristly near the back of his neck. He felt his earlobes, but there were no earrings. He ran to the mirror, and he was heartbroken. Ma Lokhi hadn't granted his wish. He wondered if it was because everyone thought he was a boy, and if Ma Lokhi turned him into a girl, she would have to secretly meddle with other people's memories.
Thank you so much, Angshu. You write that it took you 5 years to make this beautiful book. Can you say what it was, what the challenges were?
Well, I'd been thinking of this book for a long time, close on 20 years, I think. I'm trained as a computer engineer, and I'm completely unschooled in the craft of writing a book. So I had a bunch of misadventures in the beginning. So I started out in first person, hoping to connect more, directly with the protagonist. But, the protagonist is a 12 to 15-year-old boy, and the things that he thinks aren't necessarily the things that he can write in the language that he's likely to employ. So I had to scrap that first-person narrative and go down to third person again. Then another challenge was, the setting. So I thought, okay, I'd set it in the modern day. And then I found myself boxed in by the vocabulary of the present day, in the sense that, okay, so we need to talk about then his identity and the specificities of his attractions and his aspirations. And, again, we're talking about a young child, and I didn't want to foist upon him all of that. So I thought, okay, let's set it in a time when, you couldn't look up on the internet what your particular desires meant, what it meant to, want to be a girl when everyone thought you were a boy. So that was another misadventure. So all those couple of drafts and a full-time job as a software engineer, I guess that's where the 5 years went.
Well, it was put to very good use because it's a beautifully crafted novel. What were the issues that you wanted to address or for growing up, knowing that he or she was different?
I actually, a young mind is unfettered and alive with possibilities and desires that are possibly forbidden by, society. So I wanted to, young people want strange things. They want to fly. They want their own rocket ship. And this wanting, between this wanting and the yearning that I talk about in Orko's narrative, there's a chasm. This chasm I wanted to explore in a very free-flowing way. So so I didn't really want to tackle any specific issues with this book, but I wanted to talk about how it feels to want something that's seemingly impossible.
Thank you. I think the last question that we'll be able to go and talk about Angshu is, let me talk about Brishti, his friend, and his aunt, Sudeshna, and his father, who understood and accepted Orko for who he was. But Brishti really was the only one who acknowledged this to Orko and shared her identity with him. Can you speak more about the bonds of solidarity and the importance of acknowledgement for a person, and especially a young person, to accept their own identity they're trying to be?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. Actually, I can answer it, I think, from personal experience, sort of. So when I was 11 years old, I was sent away to military school, right? And there, basically, it's a hyper-masculine environment. So the expectations that come to you from history, I mean, the weight of what you need to be because you're a boy or a girl, that's kind of magnified 1,000-fold in an environment like that. So in that environment, I often wanted to be anything but a boy. And these were things I thought about, but I could never, voice. I could never talk about with anyone. And I know that if there was a single person in that place who knew how I was feeling, my childhood would have been infinitely happier. And when I was writing this friendship between Orko and Brishti, it was sort of this loneliness of my young age, sort of, it was sort of, part of it washed away because I was writing this. And I know that that's what solidarity means, that having someone who at least knows how you're feeling and says that, it's okay to feel like that. And as far as the question of identity goes, I don't know. I mean, Orko is a young person. I wouldn't like to foist an identity on him. But, the book ends before he actually comes to any sort of conclusion about his identity, and that's sort of deliberate.
Okay, I think we can have just maybe one more question because we have another minute for this session. Just as Orko, as you said, you've hinted now, was able to assert himself and his identity, your story takes a turn. Was the burden for him too heavy and a weight for him to carry was too heavy, and that's where you wanted to leave us stranded?
That's an interesting question because just for people who haven't read the book, in the end, Orko basically leaps into the Dhakuria lake. Now, that could mean two things. One of them could be that, okay, the weight of, everything is too much for him to bear, and he, perishes in the lake. The other, and the one that I tend to like better than this one, is that, he asserts that it's okay to wear earrings and go skinny dipping in the lake. These are not incompatible things. I mean, one person can do both of these things. So that's what the end is about.
And the novel is written so beautifully. By the end, I first wondered which of the two it was, and then I said, yeah, both could be possible. So you were able to put across exactly what you wanted to do, which shows how masterful your work is.
Thank you.
So let me now move to the last speaker. Many of you know him, Sandip Roy. He's an older book, but a book that's still very, very relevant. It's also very lovely. Don't let him know. Ow. Don't let him know. I can't hold so many things at the same time. Don't let him know. So Sandip is going to read again for about... Sandip is also going to read for 4 minutes from his paperback version of his book. You can hold that up. To a different cover. Don't let him know. And we may even have some questions after yours to all three of us.
Okay.
Thanks.
Great. Thank you, Jael. So this is a section, this is a chapter in which the young boy named Avinash, he used to hate getting his hair cut, which I don't know, many of you might share that. I certainly did. I used to hate sitting still and getting a haircut. Then one day, soon after Avinash's 14th birthday, everything changed. He had gone to New Modern Salon for his monthly ritual and found to his surprise a new face. He was much younger than any of the other barbers there. As soon as Avinash saw him, he had a vision of Father Rosario's scowling face. This fellow looked just like the no-good loafer boys they had all been warned about. His hair was long. What was even more shocking was that he had left not one, not two, but 3 buttons open on his dark blue shirt. Harish Babu, is the barber there, said, "This is Sultan. He's here because Lokhan Babu had to go to his home in Baharampur." So Avinash sits down on his chair. When Avinash saw Harish Babu coming towards him with his scissors, he almost cried out, "No." He didn't know why, and he didn't know how to say it without making a complete fool of himself, but he really wanted Sultan to cut his hair. Avinash imagined there was a small stool on the floor, which Harish Babu could not see. He imagined him stumbling over it, the scissors flying from his hand, and Harish Babu himself falling, toppling over, his white dhoti unraveling as his foot caught in it. Avinash imagined all the clumps of hair on the floor rising up like a flurry of pigeons and then settling gently on his white shirt. But there was no stool and there was no escape. Avinash felt Harish Babu's coarse fingers tying the white sheet around his neck. In the mirror, he saw Sultan, and was it his imagination, or was he looking at him with a knowing smile? Avinash dropped his eyes in confusion. So then, I'm going to fast forward a little bit, and so they're getting the haircut, and then suddenly, Sultan says, can't we turn on the air conditioner, Harish Babu? Harish Babu froze, scissors in midair. Air conditioner, he said, slowly enunciating each syllable. Yes, said Sultan calmly, this is supposed to be air-conditioned, isn't it? Look, that's what it said. He gestured to the door. New Modern Salon for gents, air-conditioned. Harish Babu slowly lowered his scissors. In all his years at the saloon, he had never encountered such insolence, and in front of customers too. Well, he said quietly, do you know how much it costs to run the air conditioner? Perhaps I should take it out of your salary. Perhaps then you'll understand that money doesn't just grow on trees. Well, then you shouldn't say air-conditioned. I mean, if you don't run the AC in the middle of summer, what's the point? Harish Babu put down his scissors. Avinash was afraid he might drop them on his head. Then he turned around to face Sultan and said, the point is, we have an air conditioner, and it is my decision when we want to run it. But don't you think it makes sense to run it on a hot afternoon like this? I'm sure your customers would agree, wouldn't you? Now he looked straight at Avinash and raised one eyebrow questioningly. Trapped between them, Avinash squirmed. He felt Harish Babu's lightly laid hand on his shoulder tighten his grip. Sultan's eyes held his with easy familiarity. Avinash flushed and swallowed. Well, said Sultan, isn't it hot? Yes, Avinash replied. Yes, it is. His words came out as a squeak. But with those words, Avinash had a feeling that he had just taken a huge hatchet and hacked away the ropes that tied his boat to the shore, and he was now floating away uncontrollably into the ocean. Yes, chimed the fat man. After all, you charge 3 rupees more than Prince Saloon across the street. Harish Babu let go of Avinash's shoulder and stalked over to the air conditioner. He turned it on, and as it grumbled to life, Avinash looked into the mirror. He caught Sultan's eye. There was a half smile on his lips, and when he saw him looking, Sultan grinned and winked. Avinash blushed and looked away. Harish Babu returned to his chair and said icily, I trust the little Sahib is feeling cooler now. Then he turned to Sultan and said, when you open your own salon, you keep the air conditioner running 8 hours a day. Of course I will, said Sultan. Why 8? I'll run it 24 hours a day. That night, then Avinash looks at him excitedly, hoping he would accord him respect as a fellow rebel. But he seemed to have forgotten Avinash was there. That night, Avinash appeared in his dream. That night, Sultan appeared in his dream. Avinash did not remember anything of it, except he woke in the morning with his image graven in his head. And he didn't remember what they were doing together in the dream, but he knew whatever it was, it had been painfully pleasurable in the way only truly secret secrets are. Thank you.
Thanks, Sandip. So your novel has been described as a book about family secrets. Among them, gay sexuality is only one of them. Why did you choose to enmesh this secret with so many other secrets in the book?
Well, that's the section that I read, which ends with this thing where, you know, you have this dream and it's a secret. I wanted to actually explore this. I wasn't looking to write a gay book or a book that was trying to be a model for anything. I was actually writing a book about secrets. And it occurred to me that all of us, that something that unites all of us is secrets. You know, we all love secrets. The idea that I know that you and I share something that nobody else in this audience does is very delicious. And some secrets, like the case of Avinash, where he knows he's gay but is unable to tell the world, can become a very huge burden. But some secrets are also delicious, like that secret dream that he has. Or, there is another story where there is a great-grandmother who, after she becomes a widow, is not allowed to eat non-veg and fish and stuff. But she secretly eats macher matha at home and relishes it. And so for her, that is a delicious secret. So I just wanted to play with this idea of secrets and show that while some secrets can be very toxic and hurtful, other secrets can be delicious, but it's something that unites all of us, straight, gay, lesbian, transgender, queer, whatever, across the rainbow.
Yeah, you can see all these books are so subtle and written so well. Okay, Sandip, you enmesh secrets with betrayals and with untruths, and you explore the costs of keeping silent also, because there's this cost as well as its deliciousness, right? Can you speak to those issues, the burdens?
Absolutely.
The
so
silences?
in the book, I mean, for people who haven't read it, Avinash is never able to come to terms with his secret, and so in the end, he gets married, as many people as happens all the time in our here. And his wife stumbles upon this secret and discovers this truth about him. But then it becomes her secret, and she's sort of unable to confront him with the secret either. So it becomes a secret within a secret. And the price of not being able to talk about it becomes something that can become almost generational, because it will then color every aspect of her dealing with him, with their child. You know, there will be that sense of betrayal. And, we are, a lot of us here are Bengalis. We are very good at Obhiman. You know, this comes very classically to us. So, if we carry this sense of betrayal very close to us, and we have a lot of Obhiman about slights we perceive and not. And I think the secrets in that, when it's, the problem becomes when the secret festers, then it is no longer something pleasurable. It is basically ruining every aspect, because all the time you're thinking, what if? And in the same way as Angshu was talking about, when you're a kid in a hyper-masculine environment, and you just hope there's that one other person who can understand you. And not having that person, in the end might result in a lovely book like Fern Road Boy, but so that's a double-edged sword, right? If you had that person who had helped you, maybe Fun Road Boy wouldn't have happened. But we don't know. But, in the end, we would all rather have happier childhoods, I would imagine.
I'm going to ask you one more question, Sandip, and then go around back again to the other speakers as well. And I'm going to jump. You juxtapose India and America. The novel moves back and forth from the very beginning between the states. I think it even starts in the states.
It starts in America.
Starts in America, and you go back and forth between Calcutta and America. And you discuss also, not discuss, but we see the different ways in which they deal with sexuality in both these societies. What did you want to explore with the readers when you discuss that in a very subtle way? Everybody says the first book that you write is like the low-hanging fruit from the tree. So you
you steal from your own life, which is what's out there. And since I was somebody who was living that life, I grew up here, went to college here, then went to America, and then went back and forth. So it was very natural for me to write a book that was sort of set in both places, without necessarily feeling like I wanted to specifically explore some differences. The differences just came out naturally as in the process of writing about it. And none of them had to be representative, even in America, there are pockets where there is a lot of supportive issues around LGBT, and the same thing was happening in India. And I just wanted to show in some ways that something that I would constantly feel, that when you never left home, then you are always assured in your sense of home, however ill at ease you feel in that place. Once you go somewhere else and live for a substantial period of time and make a home there, where you're consciously making a home, consciously making a new family, as it were, a chosen family, then it becomes, people even now ask me, so where do you feel more at home? And I don't have an answer. I feel at home in both places and not at home in both places. And that is kind of the price of moving back and forth. I don't know I would have it any other way, but I just wanted to explore through these characters that Romula, goes to America, then she comes back to India. Does she necessarily feel more at home there? I don't know, because in the last story, you could say that she gets a moment of release back in America again. So there's no easy answer. I wish there were, but there is no easy answer to whether we can go back home again.
Paromita, I'm going to come back to you because I want you to sort of each have a chance to sum up in terms of your books, and you can take time because I think monologue is really very important at a political level as well. So can you just talk a little about the hopes for this book, how it's done, what you think is important for people here to know about the book?
I think the book is also making very important points about borders, transnational movements, especially when we are talking about queer movements, the importance of having the ability to cross borders and to have solidarities across borders. So I think in that sense, the book is really doing some important work, political work. Also, given the fact that, there are such cultural differences across the borders. I mean, they're all Bengali, lesbian, identified women or, female-bodied persons. So despite those similarities, there's also huge political differences. Yes and not, as Sandip was saying, because we know about the kinds of things that were happening, in terms of murders of gay persons, social media bloggers that were happening in Bangladesh, which is not to say that, similar things don't happen here or cannot happen here. And increasingly, as we see, a kind of consolidation of right-wing powers, these are things that will probably happen pretty much everywhere. So I think this is the time to, really tighten our seatbelts and, think about South Asian solidarities because we are really looking at, difficult states. Yeah. So.
Can you also just say a few words about the importance of social media in terms of how that's infected both individual women on the ground in both places, but also in terms of movement building?
Yes. I think social media is a double-edged sword, pretty much like secrets or having or not having people to talk to. So the social media, particularly for the queer movement, particularly in places where there's been legislative issues, where there's been clearly laws against same-sex desire, there the social media has acted both as a platform to bring together solidarities of people, but it has also in many ways visibilized people who had, it's about secret keeping and not secret keeping. So it has also visibilized them in a way that sometimes has actually jeopardized them, has endangered them. So I think the social media works in both ways. It brings together people, and also in terms of, Uh, I think, this was a very, very interesting thing you said about, you can just Google things now, and, what does it mean? What was the time before that? And I think it's a very, very important difference there. The painful process of finding out yourself and suddenly, having some information thrust at you, and what that means for identity building. I think, again, in those terms. So I think if you look at the narratives, pretty much all of them have said, how they found people like themselves on the social media. But we know, as I was just saying that in Bangladesh, social media bloggers, 2 gay men were actually killed because they were, they became much more visible than otherwise they would have been. So I think it cuts both ways. But I think in the narratives, what was interesting is to see, the great importance it has played in the lives of, and also in terms of, you were saying, I think it's an important issue that women across the border were able to say the things, because Safo had made a book in 2005, which was actually called, in Bangla, it's Tumi Naki Chi Tumi Naki. And then there's suspension dots, where the word lesbian is not actually articulated. So I think here to call these lesbian monologues, I think it is that journey of coming of age. So I think to be able to say it is very important, but the minute you say it, you also have to deal with the consequences of it. So I think, we need to remember issues of safety, issues of danger, as well as issues of claiming one's identity, and all of those things are political issues, and I think those are very clearly there in the book.
Okay, so I was going to give the speakers here a chance to raise a question for another speaker before I actually open it up for the audience to participate as well. So Sandip, would you like to go and see if there's anything you want to ask or that intrigued you? Or have you read both these books? Or if you haven't read them, what intrigued you about the books?
I have actually, because I blurbed Angshu's book and I picked this up at the book fair earlier this year. No, it's not so much as a question that I have. I mean, this book is clearly, these are testimonials almost, these women. And then you are writing much more sort of novel based on that. And I just was curious if you, what you thought about that tension where, you don't necessarily want your book to suddenly become this stand-in for all children questioning their identity as a young person, because it's a personal story about one child. And at the same time, when you write these testimonials, I mean, while they are bearing witness, and that is very important, I think what's also fascinating with the bits that Sumita read was they're also like stories. They're also telling stories. So like the danger of the story getting lost sometimes because we are trying to, because people want to read a certain political statement or point.
So should we start with, that's a more comment. Yeah, so with that's a good comment. Do any of you want to respond to that?
I completely agree with you, and I think what the important thing was, calling it monologues, because these are individual statements. These are not testimonial necessarily, but they are also testimonial. But so I think that choice of using the word monologue is interesting because they are very individual as well. Yeah.
Actually, that's to me. Did you all have a specific question to trigger the monologue? Like, how did that?
Yeah, I think it was very, very loosely structured. I mean, there was questions about childhood, growing up, how did you find yourself, what is the situation now, what do you think about marriage? So those kinds of, very broad questions. But they elicited very different kinds of responses, which is what was exciting. And but at the same time, there were issues, cross-cutting issues as well. But I think, their status as individual stories is very important and should be preserved. Yeah.
What I really liked also about monologue was that they were short, they were crisp, so they were really well edited, I think, as well. They flowed. And you also had a sense of who the person was, not by name, but by age and profession and the location. So I thought that was really interesting, too, because you could actually, at least for me, I could visualize the person who was speaking, because it was so much in the local idiom, you know, that worked very well for me. So before I open it up to the House, do you have a question, Paromita, for either of the speakers, or Angshu, do you have a question? Or comment?
I think the audience should have a go.
Okay, so we have 9 minutes left. So open to all of you if anybody has a question for either of the speakers. Bachi there has a question.
I'm sorry I missed this session, but I do have a question. In fact, two. One is that, you know, people seem to think that the LGBT community is one homogeneous group. It isn't. You know, there's a lot of a lot of diversity within it, because you're dealing with different human beings who are basically different. So do you sort of think I mean, is there a way to stop the conflicting voices? Is there a way to bring about some kind of uniformity? That is one part. And the other thing is that, you know, I used to do an agony aunt column for Mumbai Mirror, and I was like amazed at the level of uncertainty about people's sexuality, despite there being so much now in the public space about, you know, how you can be different. So is this something that you, obviously you worry about, but how do you, I mean, do you go out to as many public forums? How many spokespeople have you got? Because when I was writing on HIV/AIDS, that was the big problem, that there was no one from the middle class who was willing to be the voice of the middle class, and so everyone kept saying, oh no, it's a problem of the sex workers. So do you have a problem of championship, of spokespersons, of struggling with the differences within your own group, the differences between the homosexuals and the lesbian community? Because, I mean, I have written about all this in the past, and it is there, because, I mean, when I was writing on the lesbian community, they said, oh, but the homosexual community tends to keep us, you know, on the margins. I hope it has changed, because this was a while ago.
Thanks, Bachi. I'm a great admirer of yours, if I might say so. Your question about fractures within the community is absolutely valid and justified, but I think it is true of most communities who are trying to politically gather together, but also remain their individual selves. So there is a political agenda. Sometimes there's a minimum common agenda for which you're fighting, and for which, certain kinds of struggles also come together. You know, you have broad alliances, but those alliances don't necessarily mean that you erase your own specific experiences. So I think there's always a danger of, you know, the political contingency of the moment, you know, where you have to show a kind of face of solidarity. Sometimes, you know, that actually fractures the movement inside, because, you know, a lot of people feel that their voices haven't been represented. For the longest time, you know, in the women's movement, it's been the same. You know, black women felt they were not represented. Lesbian women felt they were not represented. So I don't think it's unique to the LGBTQ movement at all. And I think it is a problem that, you know, most movements have to contend with and find their own solutions. But I think, you know, now increasingly that's being shown through, you know, the use of the word queer rather than, you know, other identity categories, which sometimes, you know, glosses over, which is why, you know, in monologue they've chosen to reclaim the word lesbian. You know, we are not queer, we are lesbian, we are very specific. So sometimes you need to emphasize your specificities, which is why I think, you know, fiction is wonderful and individual voices are wonderful, because, you know, then the specificities do come out. But at the same time, of course, there's a political struggle which has to be fought together. So yeah, I forgot your next question, sorry.
I actually remember, and I'll sort of answer it in a slightly angle. You know, when you talk about people still being uncertain about it, and this goes back to the earlier point that you were raising, Paromita, about the fact, and which you mentioned, that so much is available on Google right now. So in the ancient time, pre-Google time, when I used to be involved with a group called South Asian LGBT group called Trikon in America, and I have to say none of us went in there as activists at all. We just went there because there was no other way to find each other. We didn't know anybody who was brown and gay in a place like California. You know, those worlds were so separate. So we wanted a place where we could be brown and queer at the same time and just relax and not rep. And so we came together, and in that process of doing potlucks, doing mailing parties where we would all sit and stick stamps on Trikon magazine and mail it out to the world, we forged both a community and we became unknowingly sort of activists and built solidarities and connections with us. It was the first time many of us were working with somebody who was Pakistani. We just so happened we were in that same, and we found that commonality. While the internet has been a huge boon for people in remote places to be able to find each other and answer these questions, it has also short-circuited that process where a lot of groups like Trikon are not so necessary anymore. A lot of people feel like, I can go online and find other people like this. And in that process, they don't go through that process of discovery that we unwittingly went through, and that gave us eventually the strength to come out and be spokesperson in a way. Next to you, actually, Mr. Ashok Chatterjee, he was in the Bay Area, and with the Probashi Bangali organization there, they used to do this annual big Durga Puja time convocation. And his son Anirban, I remember, asked Trikon to come and do a presentation at this Bangali Sammelan. And that created an enormous stir, because the Bangali Sammelan is basically about Probashi Bangalis hoping their sons, Probashi sons, will meet a Probashi daughter before they meet somebody who is, white or Asian, do their Durga Puja and find each other. And in the middle of that, there was, I remember, entire conference call about, like, can we have these LGBT Bangalis on there? And eventually, I think, if I remember right, they did the session was called, like, taboo issues. And, we found one gay person, one divorced person, and we put them all on stage together, and that way. But, those conversations happened as a result of these things going on.
I think also I remember Trikon, and Lotus was the book that you all put up, the first book that you all brought up, Lotus of Another Color. And I think also what happened with Trikon, it opened up conversations between America and Indians over here, which I think was also very important. So those transnational connections, I think, were also made.
We used to mail Trikon from America to India, but people were afraid to, read it in public. So we would do a special soft edition, which was smaller, which could be slipped inside another book, and you could read it on the train.
Yeah, I remember those days too. We have 2 minutes left. Angshu, would you like to say something more? And then we can...
Yeah, I just wanted to address that part about uncertainty that Bachi pointed out. So when you talk about uncertainty, I mean, there are people who will remain uncertain for their entire lives. And it's hard, and it's sometimes detrimental to try and force them into any box. And maybe the queer word is probably the most suitable for them, but then again, that encompasses many things that that specific individual might not identify with. And that's a question to which the answer, I mean, we are yet to find. I don't know what to do about uncertainty. I mean, yeah, that's there, and we should just let it be, I think, the uncertainty.
And I just wanted to say something more to Bachi. I think there's no streamlining and mainstreaming of movements. That diversity is the lifeblood of the movement, and the openness and the elasticity, and it's going to keep changing and growing. What we knew today about identity and what it's going to be later, we can't box. So I think actually making space and fluidity so that these identities can move with time is really important. We have a minute left, so if there's a burning question from the audience, any burning questions? Question? Yes? Yes, please, sir? No? Okay, so I would like to just say I have a minute, 50 seconds left. Thank you so much to the speakers and to the audience. Thank you for being with us. And I also want to encourage you to get all 3 of these books. If you haven't read Sandip's book, it's been on the shelf longer. It's still as relevant as important. Monologue, I think, is really, really important politically. And as just a general reader, it's a really good insight into the struggles of women at every age. It's also a very hopeful book because a lot of women have been able to assert their identity and found themselves and be able to be fully who they are. So it's also very inspiring. And Fern Road is a beautifully delicate novel of a boy growing up in South Kolkata and trying to find his voice in places where it's not always very easy. So I encourage you to read all 3, and thank you for being with us today.